Chapter 1161, Anthony on Tour Part 13. Like I said, the folks seem like they're down to fight at pretty much the drop of a hat. Before 10 minutes have passed, I find myself in an arena, surrounded by hundreds of spectators, while the dogkin is stretching and taking some practice swings of his blade. How many of these arenas do you have? I ask, a little bewildered. A lot, he says. We hone our skills in battle constantly against each other, and then against the dungeon. Sometimes there are demonstrations where captured monsters are brought in so our warriors can test themselves against them. Most of these people probably assume that is the case here. He waves to the crowd and they cheer. I wave to them with an antenna and get no response. Rude. Alright, what are the rules? Fight, but don't kill. ... That's it, that's it. Use your full strength, because I will be using mine. So saying, he takes a firm grip of his sword and lowers himself into a grounded stance. The atmosphere becomes serious in an instant. A hush descends upon the crowd, as the audience holds their breath, waiting for the moment the battle begins. For my part, I'm still pretty confused. This guy is just going to fight me, with a sword. Just one. Look, I don't have the biggest ego in the world, but I'm a tier 7, mythic monster over here. I don't have the kind of ant numbers within range to really fuel the altar, but am I even going to need it? Then again, this guy seems to be a professional warrior, someone who knows their stuff. Is there something going on he's aware of but I'm not? It would be seriously embarrassing if I were to lose in an instant to some trick I didn't see coming, so I decide to brace myself, spin up my mind constructs and take things seriously. A slight shift of my opponent's foot is all the warning I get. Fast. Clang. Antennae blaring in warning, my nerves fire and I shift my position, angling my head to the side just in time for the blade, which would have punctured my eye, to spark off my carapace. Holy moly, that's some serious speed. Surprised that he missed, my opponent is still quick to react, pushing off my thorax with both feet to create some distance before he readies himself again. Not wanting to be caught out, I turn to face him directly, baring my mandibles. Whoa, clang. Again, he leaps forward with incredible speed, launching from the ground like a guided missile. I shift my head and again, the blade strikes hard against my gravity-compressed diamond carapace, sending sparks flying high into the air. This time, I'm not going to let him reset himself so easily. I lash out with my mandibles, not using Void Chomp, because I don't want to destroy the arena, but I put a bit of force behind it. With an insanely fast move, he parries one of my mandibles in mid-air, using the force of the blow to bring himself back down to the ground. Legs tucked, he prepares to launch himself again. Let's try a little force magic. I hit him with a blast in the face, or at least, I try to, but he somehow senses it coming and leaps to the side. So I try it again. And again, and another 5 times after that. I don't manage to land a hit. Even though the spell itself is invisible, he somehow knows it's coming, but I'm not allowing him the time to set his feet for one of those rocket jumps. In the end, all that happens is he bounces around the arena while my spells slam into the reinforced earth walls with resounding thuds. Eventually, he gets bored, or frustrated, and lashes out with a powerful swing. Unlike the other times, he activates a skill. A wave of crystalline sword light is formed on the edge of the blade before it flies off, racing toward me with incredible speed. I've never seen sword light this dense or fast-moving before. Clearly this guy has a high-level sword skill. Of course, my reactions are on point and I angle my carapace perfectly. When the light hits, I feel the impact through my whole body, but my trusty carapace doesn't yield a bit. Hey, not enough, not even remotely enough. The crowd gasps as one, shocked that the mighty cut wasn't enough to get through my exoskeleton, but the dog folk isn't done. With a shout, he pulls back, leaps up into the air and unleashes a flurry of strikes, each of them sending an arc of sword light flying at me. A roar of approval bursts from the crowd, but it soon quietens as I roll deftly out of the way. Well, I say deft. The ground literally rumbles when I roll now, given how large I am. Time to take this a little bit more seriously. I pull out a huge chunk of gravity mana and begin to compress and shape it, my mind's working in concert to complete the work. In short order, the gravity domain is ready and I deploy it, ensuring it covers the entire arena, but not beyond. For good measure, I give it a kick from the altar, empowering the spell massively as it expands with me at the center. The moment it catches my opponent within the diameter, he buckles, but doesn't fall. Clearly, he hasn't skipped legs day, but I doubt he can perform those fancy bullet-like jumps with the weight of the clang. Or he can. Not as fast as before, sure, but I wasn't expecting it at all. Thankfully, my trusty future sense and reflexes are up to the task, and once again, my precious eyeball is saved from certain slicing. This guy really likes going for the eyeball. I guess he figures he can't get through the carapace. His sword strikes have been heavy, sure, but my gleaming carapace has barely a scratch at this point. I lunge again. This time, I know something my opponent doesn't. Under a gravity domain of this kind of strength, he isn't going to be in the air for long. He slams into the ground, and my mandibles are there. I chomp down with enough force to hold onto him. Now, I don't want to bite through the guy, so what exactly do I do? In a flash of inspiration, I drop the domain before I start to spin, building up momentum as I turn once, twice, then I release. As if he were shot from a cannon, my opponent streaks through the air before he slams into the wall with thunderous force. Whoops. Chapter 1162. Anthony on Tour Part 14. You really thought you were strong enough to beat a mythic monster on your own? I figured you were just an ant. How was I supposed to know? I'm a Tier 7, mythic ant. Probably the first one in the history of the darn dungeon. Pay a little respect, man. Thankfully, my opponent wounded nothing but his pride in our confrontation. I think, for a moment, the crowd were considering rushing down and attempting to subdue the wild monster, which would have been a rather difficult scenario to navigate, but thankfully they relaxed when I sat down and didn't follow up on my strike. I mean, whose first instinct is to rush at the huge monster? The folk are crazy, I'm telling you. He rubs a hand over his furry head, disgruntled. If we'd known you were this strong, we would have gotten some higher-ranked swordsmen to guard you. There's no way the Brathians lied to you about my tier, right? He shrugs helplessly. They probably assumed the same thing I did. Tier 7, but an ant, so it's fine. As a result, you only got me and my apprentice's guards, and I hate to say it, but we aren't up to the job. Oh, the rabbit girl is your apprentice. What do you mean, rabbit? I don't know, I was just getting rabbit vibes from her. And what are you getting from me? Dog or wolf, depending on your mood. I figure honesty is the best policy. If I'm being unspeakably rude, hopefully someone will tell me. That's unspeakably rude, he says, placing a hand to the bridge of his muzzle. Dang it. Hey, I didn't know. I apologize if I've caused offense. You guys don't like being discussed in relation to the animal you resemble. No, we prefer to focus on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us. He pushes himself to his feet and looks around. A lot of the crowd has dispersed, but there are still people in their seats, looking down at the two of us. We need to clear out, there'll be another fight soon, so we need to make space. Oh, so these fighting pits get used a lot. That wolfish grin again. Around the clock. There isn't a fancy exit or anything, I just find a relatively empty part of the stands and climb right on over, my opponent hopping along beside me. So you aren't a blade master? I ask. What? Of course not. I'm of the 5th sword, not the 10th. So, you're halfway to a blade master. In terms of rank, yes. My student is of the 4th. Oh wow, you're lucky I went easy on you then. I wasn't sure how much you could take. I can tell he wants to rebut my statement, but after being defeated so handily, there isn't much he can say. Can I get your name, by the way? It's getting awkward just to think of you as that guy. You were thinking, that dog guy, weren't you? I would never. Yes I was. He sort of ripples, and I realize it was an instinct, a dog raising its hackles. Although I make sure to think that thought quietly. It's fine, he mutters. My name is Barker. I carefully don't say anything. Once we are out of the fighting pit and back on the road, heading towards the field the colony we're setting up in, the not rabbit folk joins us again, grinning broadly at her teacher. They speak to each other, she makes fun of him, at least, I think so, and then we're back to strolling along the path. So does this mean I'm going to get new guards? Stronger ones? Barker grimaces. Yes, I can't exactly help people feel safe if you can kick my backside whenever you want. Oh, I definitely can. Like I didn't even use my middle grade stuff, let alone the best stuff. Alright, we believe in a thing called graceful victory. I don't. Okay, I guess that's fair. Once we get back to what in the name of the source? What? I look around, wondering what brought on the sudden exclamation. Barker points a finger. What is that? I look where he's pointing. That's a nest. It's massive. I mean, it really isn't. We've been gone for like an hour, at the most, and there's only so much the carvers can do in that amount of time. It's barely 50 meters tall. You said we could build a nest, right? They aren't finished yet, but that's a nest. We sleep in them and stuff. It looks like a castle. Come on, this is pretty small, as far as nests go, but it does have to fit 1,000 of us inside. Once again, Barker pinches his brow and sighs heavily. I probably should have checked what you were going to build. We're pretty lax when it comes to building code. I'd noticed, but we aren't this relaxed. You can't throw up something this big without checking with the council. Well, you told us we couldn't go underground, which was smart, so they had to build up. Would it be better if it was wider rather than taller? Maybe. It doesn't matter, I'll have to check with someone regardless. He turns and speaks to his student, who offers a short bow before she sprints off at impressive speeds. She's going to inform the school of what's transpired here and they'll send someone more suitable to guard you. When they get here, they can make a judgment on that. He gestures towards the still-growing nest. And you should probably expect a lot of challenges going forward. Every student of the sword loves to test their mettle against strong monsters, and word of your victory will be spreading quickly through Freehill. We just came here to trade, I sigh. Barker shrugs. Winning duels isn't a bad way to advertise. We're the folk, we admire the strong. Chapter 1163, Anthony on Tour Part 15. It doesn't take that long for my new guards to arrive, although Barker and his apprentice Fluffles also stick around. I mean Fluffles. It's offensive to mention she has a rabbit nose, but that's a totally fine name to have, apparently. Whatever. The cultural idiosyncrasies of the folk don't need to make sense to me. They can, and do, call themselves whatever they want. I'm just here to check out the place and sell some end tables. My new guard is, I'm pretty sure, a turtle guy named Phil, though of course I don't mention his shell, no matter how much I want to. Like, does he have a wax routine for that thing? I'm only wondering because it has such a healthy sheen and I'll be darned if I don't want my carapace to look like that. With him comes his apprentice, Pete, who is also a turtle, but doesn't have a shell, but does have a sort of turtle face, with the beaked mouth and all that. These people make no sense to me. It seems clear immediately that they've sent some more powerful warriors. There's a certain aura around them that lets me know they mean business. I'm not willing to be rude about their appearance, but there are other things I'm willing to be rude about. So, are you a blade master? I ask as soon as introductions are done. You want to fight and find out? He replies. This guy is clearly pretty old, judging by the long silver beard and mustache he's sporting, but his mental voice is still gravelly and vigorous. He sounds like he'd give Granon a run for his money in a rock-chewing contest. Not really, I reply, and I swear he slumps a little in disappointment. I just had a fight, so I thought I'd relax for a second, get a little private time. Although I couldn't move on the ship, I was the center of attention pretty much all the time. People gawping at me from the other ships, ants checking if I was still alright, birds threatening to drop bombs on me. It got stressful. Also, it's been too long since I was embraced by sweet dirt. Phil looks around, confused. You've got 20 ants inside 5 meters of you. How is that, private time? He says something to Barker, who whips out his sword, looking a little confused. Whoa, those are my bodyguards and they do a pretty good job staying out of sight. I can't get rid of them even if I want to. Protectant. Stubborn, resentful silence. Protectant. We had to stay on that ship too, she says, not revealing herself. It was awful. Hey, the ship sucks, I'm on your team. What also sucks is getting chopped up by turtle folk, so you need to reveal yourself so I can explain who and what you are. She waits until I'm just about to admonish her again to drop her forget-me-field or whatever, appearing in front of the 4 folk. This here is Protectant. She's one of the 20 guards who are with me around the clock. Don't worry, we included their numbers in our allowed 1,000 ants. Phil and Pete don't react, but Barker and Fluffles do, seemingly quite annoyed. Why didn't you tell us about them? Barker demands after connecting to me via Mind Bridge. Why would I reply. They aren't doing anything other than being hard to spot. Besides, they are included in the manifest that lists the key members of this voyage. Is it my fault you didn't read it carefully? I get the feeling the folk have a go with the flow kind of approach to just about everything except fighting. That appears to include admin. There isn't much they can say to what I've said, so I take the chance to ease my way into the large cavern space that the colony has opened up for me. I'm going to take a nap, then I'll think about having some more fights. Although I do have to warn you, Phil. If you aren't significantly stronger than Barker over there, you might find yourself considerably overmatched. The turtle folk narrows his eyes as his hand plays across the hilt of his curved blade. I think you'll find I'm more than up to the task. I miss the blessed relaxation of Aunt Zen. The dirt in my mandibles, the flowing tunnel air, my siblings by my side. Getting a proper rest on the boat was absolutely impossible, not that I physically needed one. After a brief snooze surrounded by dirt, I feel 100 times better. I emerge, stretching my antennae and clacking my mandibles happily. This is the life. Exploring, adventuring, and not having to worry about getting toxified by a race of evil slug people. Good times. There's another surprise waiting for me when I emerge. Gray, White, nice to see you again. The pair of folk, one wolfish, one weaselish, appear largely unchanged since the last time I saw them, still furry and or muzzled, with that strange air of dignity about them. Anthony, it's a surprise to see you again in these circumstances, Gray rumbles. I didn't think the colony would come into contact with my people for years yet. Ha, we aren't lazy like most people on Pangura. Surely you aren't that surprised. I mean, I bet we were more surprised the first time we met you. Remember, you were all knack. I don't think there's any need to go into detail about that. Gray breaks in hastily, his voice going up several octaves. To the side, White covers her face as her shoulders shake with laughter. You sure? I really wanted to tell everyone about it when I got here. Apparently, Blade Masters are quite the respected individuals around Freehill. You are a Blade Master, aren't you? Gray sighs, defeated. What do you want, Anthony? Tour around town and help managing fights. Gray looks around. You only just arrived, how many people want to fight you already? I connect to Phil and Pete as well. Who wants a fight today? I ask. Both turtle folk put their hands up. As does White. I've got 3 lined up and I rolled out of the nest about 1 minute ago. What can I say? Big bad monsters are pretty popular in this town, Gray. Not quite in the way you're thinking, he says, but fine. Let's start with the fights, then we can move on to the tour. I didn't have anything planned for today anyway. You're being sarcastic, aren't you? Of course I am. Let's get moving. Chapter 1164. Anthony on Tour Part 16. Are you telling me her real name isn't Fluffles? I demand. Of course not, Gray scowls. What kind of a name is Fluffles? That's the name she gave me. I believe I told you before, we do not give out our names so easily. My name isn't Gray, and my student's name isn't White. These are aliases we use. Our real names are only shared with those we are close to. Wait, so that guy's name isn't Barker? Somehow that fills me with relief. What kind of no, his name isn't Barker? It's Woofington III. Really? Obviously not. Dang, that would have been amazing. Are you going to let Phil get up yet? I look down at the turtle folk, struggling to rise under the weight of my empowered gravity field. I was nice. After I caught him in it, I made sure to turn up the pressure gradually until we reached this point. If I slammed him with full power from the get-go, we'd have turtle pancakes here. I expected the crowd to boo or react negatively in some way. They come to these places to see a skillful, honorable fight, I assume. Instead, they've got me standing around looking at a turtle guy who can't stand up. Surprisingly, they don't seem uninterested in the slightest. There's no anger or disapproval even, they simply watch, eyes sharply focused on Phil as he battles against gravity. I mean, he's still trying, right? Shouldn't I hold him there until he surrenders? Being rude is something I want to avoid. Also, I don't particularly want to let him take any more swings at me. Phil carries a blade much larger and heavier than what Barker used, but holy moly is he able to hit a lot harder with it. The guy actually managed to put a chip in my carapace, which is an impressive feat. Looking bored, standing to one side with his arms crossed, Gray speaks to Phil, who snaps back something, causing Gray to frown. Seeing his expression, Phil capitulates and surrenders, so I connect to him with a bridge. Well done hanging in there. That can't have been pleasant. I'm going to assume that you aren't a blade master after that fight, though. I am of the 7th sword, he growls. I believed I could hold out until your power, whatever it was, became exhausted, then the fight would have been mine. I check my mana reserves. Yeah, no, I could have kept that up for a day and night. Besides, that wasn't close to how strong that pressure can get. He looks a little taken aback by that, so I hasten to reassure him. Your sword was amazingly strong, though. Look, you actually managed to chip my carapace. Right here, wait, I think it healed already. I assure you it did, though. Shoulders slumped over in defeat, Phil makes his way out of the arena, clearing the way for the next challenger. Pete steps up next, bowing to show his respect. I am of the sixth sword, and therefore weaker than my master, but I hope we can engage in instructional combat. Sure thing, let's have a good fight. I trap him in gravity immediately. Gway hey 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 hey. Pete manages to unleash one wild swing before his sword becomes too heavy for him to lift, but the sword light sparks off my carapace without harm. After struggling to resist the pressure for 5 minutes, he too surrenders. Got to be a little quicker, I'm afraid, I tell him. Once I've got you in that field, you'll struggle to get out. I've never experienced anything like it, he frowns, clicking his hooked turtle beak. What type of magic is that? Oh, just something I stumbled across. I'm not advertising my gravity mana more than I have to. If other people want to learn the secrets I worked so hard for, they can jolly well do it without help from me. Until they earn a bit more trust, I suppose. White steps up next and offers to fight, her cool dignity and calm demeanor unruffled when facing down a tier 7 monster such as myself. I make sure Gray is fine with it before accepting the challenge, and he gives me the nod. Fighting White isn't what I'd expected. The moment the fight begins, she's moving. She's fast, incredibly fast, but it appears almost effortless, like she's floating above the ground. In one hand, she holds a long, slender blade, a gentle curve running through its length, and when she strikes, my eyes almost bug out of my head. So many slashes. Her arm moves so fast I can't even see it, and a veritable forest of sword light is created, slashing toward me, curving through the air and cutting off my avenues of escape. Even so, forewarned by my antennae, I execute a quick drop, stop and roll, avoiding the bulk of the damage and letting my carapace absorb the blows on one side. As expected, the slices are a heck of a lot lighter than what Phil and Pete were able to produce, but somehow much sharper. A centimeter-deep groove is carved into the exoskeleton, which gives me pause. For her part, White is still on the move, fluttering around the arena like a fairy as she continuously executes intense flurries of slashes. Clearly, she's a cut above Phil, possibly the 8th or 9th. I'm starting to get seriously interested in what a full blade master is actually capable of. As the fight drags on, it becomes clear that White isn't really capable of cutting through me on her own. Were she able to land a higher number of slashes, perhaps she'd be able to get more penetration, but so long as I avoid most of them, she can't get through. I could just cover the entire arena in gravity, weighing her down enough that she slows down. Once that happens, I'd be able to focus the full might of my gravity well on her, but I want to test a few things against a higher level opponent while I have the chance. Spinning up my mines, I start peppering her with gravity bolts, but she easily cuts through them all, dispersing the magic with her blade. However, it puts her on the defensive and dramatically reduces the number of slashes coming my way. I'm starting to see why you would normally need a team to take down a monster like me. It's hard for one person to defend themselves against a monster's strength while also attacking. Eventually, I go for a lunging chomp attack, which is when White reveals that I wasn't the only one going easy. Right in front of my face, she flickers and vanishes, reappearing beneath me, out of my line of sight. Without my keen senses, I wouldn't have even realized where she'd gone, straight into the blind spot. As graceful as ever, she attempts to stab upward, directly into my carapace, but I'm already moving, rolling to one side while my mind's focus on the gravity well. If she's going to stop moving, then I won't let the opportunity slip by. The moment she feels that crushing weight come down on her, White looks, just for a moment, a little irritated before she bows and surrenders. Chapter 1165, Anthony on Tour Part 17. The folk are, to some extent, an insular people. They hold a firm belief in relying on one's own strength to accomplish a goal, and as such, don't like solving their problems through the power of coin. If they are lacking a particular resource, then by far the more honorable course of action is to go out and acquire it for themselves, yet, in a complex world, such simple solutions do not always present themselves. Since the coalition was formed, that is, the united front of all the disparate clans that went on to be known as the folk, they have engaged in an often clumsy and frequently error-ridden walk toward diplomacy. Early alliances were formed with the Bruinchi, yet their nature as a people remained generally warlike and suspicious. After becoming entangled in battles they could not win, namely against the Legion and the Empire of Sand, the leaders of the coalition decided a different approach needed to be sought. Ever since, we have witnessed the gradual opening of Freehill to trade, and a warmer, if still somewhat chilly, approach to diplomacy. Excerpt from An Outside History of the Folk, by Wissal. What have you been doing? Thoris demands. I've been fielding all sorts of inquiries about the giant ant monster, instead of negotiating prices like I should have been doing. I was called back to the temporary nest by some ant messengers during my 12th fight. A seemingly never-ending line of challengers appeared over the course of my first few bouts, and I was worried it would be rude to decline the challenges, so I ended up stuck there for a while. Fortunately, nobody too tough showed up, and the summons gave me a graceful means of retreat. Of course, when I get here, I find a rather annoyed Brathian negotiator waiting with her family and the rest of the delegation. I've just been fighting in the pits, I defend myself, holding up my front two legs in a cool out sort of motion. I haven't been able to go anywhere without getting challenged by a bevy of sword-wielding folk. I got through 12 this morning, and there were probably another 20 in line when I got your message. She's annoyed, I can tell she's annoyed, but I can also tell she doesn't want to yell at me. I'm a valuable business partner after all. I shouldn't be surprised, she eventually mutters to herself. The folk are obsessed with fighting, always have been, and the chance to prove themselves against a rare, mythic monster is like throwing gold in front of a Brathian. They can't possibly resist. It's almost refreshing how open her people are with their own greed. They know exactly what they're like, they just don't care what anyone else thinks about it. So long as it doesn't interfere with business, of course. I've been trying to establish business partnerships all morning, but all my contemporaries want to discuss is the exciting monster that came with us. If you've been beating high-ranked swordsmen and women in the pits, I shouldn't be surprised. I beat the heck out of Phil and Pete. Who are they? My guards. Well, they went back to the place thing, or whatever, to get stronger guards. Of course they did. Look, if this is getting the folk excited, then I say we should lean into it. Bring your trading partners along to the pit and negotiate with them while I'm fighting. If I keep beating up on strong warriors, then it should only serve as a good advertisement for the colony's goods, right? This sends Iran deep into thought, until she eventually nods. This could be a workable strategy. When will you be fighting next? From what I understand, in Freehill, your next fight is never far away. I could probably line up at any arena in the city and get about in 5 minutes. I can't leave until my next set of guards arrives, though. Not supposed to move around without them. The possibility of getting some trade done has Iran buzzing with excitement, so she rushes off to make preparations. Her brother-in-law, Marsban, sticks around to talk for a bit. You've been battling against the folk? He asks. Do you know the ranks of those you've beaten? Of course. The highest was 8th. I've not fought a blade master yet, but I'm guessing it won't be long. Still not interested in fighting, Gray? The wolf folk shakes his fuzzy head. No, I do not draw my blade for the entertainment of others. Are you, like, the only one in this whole city who holds to that? He doesn't deign to reply and Marsban taps me on one leg. It's impressive you've been able to fight so well. The folk are renowned for their dueling prowess and monster-slaying ability. If you really do manage to find yourself in the pit with a master, be exceptionally careful. They have special protections in this city that you do not enjoy. I have a carapace and they have fur. I'm pretty sure I'm protected well beyond what they can manage. The Brathian warrior rolls his eyes. Legal protections. They can kill in the pits and not be prosecuted. Duels with blade masters are taken very seriously, and they don't like bloodless fighting. Much like your friend here, when they draw swords, it's serious. Well, that's something to think about. So if I end up in a duel with one of them, they'd be forgiven for killing me, but not the other way around. That hardly seems fair. Blade masters are the honor of their school, their family and their clan, Gray speaks up. When we fight, there is a great deal on the line. Pride, prestige, standing. For this reason, duels between blade masters are often private, with a few witnesses. To keep blades sharp, frequent practice is a must, but having one's clan undermined due to a few losses in a row is less than ideal. He sends me a sharp look. To fight a monster such as yourself. In the dungeon, even blade masters would hesitate to attack alone. Dueling one-on-one against you in a public arena is a tremendous risk. So this is what you meant when you said you don't draw your sword for entertainment. Practice is valuable, necessary. Public accolades are not. Well, even if the big bosses won't come out and fight, there's absolutely nothing stopping 8 and 9 sword fighters from giving it a go. With a little luck, it'll help our trade mission as well. What could go wrong? Chapter 1166. Anthony on Tour Part 18. Despite most of the peoples of Pengara using their own form of currency, even the Bruinchi used something they called a soul chip to trade amongst themselves. There was one universal unit of wealth that was good for business everywhere in the dungeon. cores, which was why Smithant and Cobalt had brought a healthy supply from the colony's stores with them on this trip, though they had begun to suspect that they may have brought too many. Their Brathian guide couldn't resist sending covetous glances towards their carry bags, strapped to their carapace, though she tried to hide it. Everything is so spread apart, Smithant huffed. It's inefficient. It is, Cobalt agreed, but it does allow room for specialities to bloom. If everyone were forced to compete in proximity to each other, every stall would be the same. It was taking a long time to get from market to market. Each district of Freehill was a sprawling mass of houses, shops, schools, fighting arenas, seemingly without much planning having gone into the layout. It was apparent that much of the growth was organic, new things being constructed when it was found to be necessary, and placed wherever the people at the time thought it would make sense. It deeply offended the ants. Yet, it wasn't their place to criticize others' way of living. They were out looking for trade, and were having greatly mixed levels of success. "What is this store?" Cobalt asked their guide. Irisad read the sign and sighed. "It is, Big Hog's Swarthy Swords. You don't seem to approve." "I find the name of the store to be poor marketing." The ants didn't care one whit for marketing, only for quality goods, so they decided to head inside, squeezing through the entrance with surprisingly little difficulty. The reason for the oversized door quickly became apparent inside, as they were confronted with the clientele. Large, pinkish-skinned and snout-nosed folk turned to stare at the two monsters, wondering what the heck was going on. "They are here to trade, with permission of the council," Irisad assured everyone, holding up the official documents in case anyone wanted to inspect them. Nobody did. From behind the counter, a particularly huge, flap-eared man emerged, looking down at the two ants. He spoke to Irisad in short, clipped tones, and the two ants waited for the translation. "He wants to know what you want to buy. Having monsters in his shop is making people nervous, so he says." "His best weapons," Smithant said without hesitation, her antennae twitching as she took in the many blades on display. The giant folk, Hog, presumably, raised one brow before he stomped out the back and then returned bearing a huge, two-handed blade. He thunked it down on the counter and invited the ants to inspect it. Smithant leapt forward, running her antennae over the metal, as well as her eye. It was an exceptional piece of work. If there was one thing that impressed her about the folk, it was the amount of craftsmanship they put into their swords. Not only was the metal refined to the highest purity, not only were the weapons perfectly shaped and balanced, not only was the enchanting smooth and faultless, it was the extra details, the flourishes, the colors, the inscriptions. Everything was done to invoke the spirit of the sword as the maker saw it, and she loved it. "I have to have it," she declared, smitten. "Look at the layering of the steel. What sort of temperature did they fire this, to get that effect? Or was it the quenching? And this metal, is it an alloy? Of what and what? Why don't we find out how much it costs?" Cobalt said, injecting some logic. "We can't even use swords, so I don't think it's necessary for us to spend all that much on them, regardless of how well made they are. We make swords for the humans," Smithant pointed out, "and techniques for making good blades can also be applied to metal mandible enhancers." A new line she was working on. It was tricky, since each set needed to be adjusted and fitted to the ant who used them, but a sharpened and enchanted set of barbs that fit over an ant's mandibles had proven to make their bites significantly more devastating. "Can you inquire as to how much this costs?" Cobalt asked Irisad, firmly. After some back and forth, the mage supplied the answer. "He's asking 1550. In my opinion, this is overpriced by as much as 20%. "Always with the overcharging," Smithant grumbled, still prodding the sword with her antennae. "Can you ask why the item is overpriced by 20%? Cobalt asked, a little fed up herself. Again, there was some back and forth before they were supplied an answer. "He says he would rather his finest sword be in the hands of a skilled swordsman, rather than sold to monsters who won't use it, so he is overcharging." The two ants considered this. "That makes sense," Smithant conceded. "Making excellent things and then giving them to people who won't use them is disappointing, as a crafter." "I agree. 20% seems fair compensation. Tell him we agree to this trade. It is our intention to study the sword in the hopes we can one day replicate its incredibly high standard of craftsmanship. Please pass on our assurances that it will be treated with respect." The ants happily paid the required price and Hog looked somewhat sheepish as he handed over the sword to his latest customers. Smithant held the blade gently in her mandibles, extremely pleased with the purchase. "Why can't your people be more like that?" Cobalt complained to Irisad. "If you were simply upfront with us about your prices, we can engage in a reasonable discussion." All these half-truths and obfuscations simply take us further from reaching an agreement, not closer. Irisade rolled her eyes. They didn't get it now, and they likely never would in the future. Chapter 1167. Anthony on Tour Part 19. The famed sword schools of the folk are as numerous as the leaves on a tree, each a unique and beautiful part of the overall picture. Some focus on hard-hitting, heavy blows that crumple armor and shatter bones even as they cut. Others concentrate on speed, moving with light steps and attacking with hundreds, thousands of sharp slashes. And, of course, everything in between is represented. What gives rise to this diversity is, in my opinion, the nature of sword light itself. I don't know how those ancient people thought of the phenomenon at the time of the system descent, but perhaps they simply thought of it as a way for weapon wielders to extend their range. Now we know it is so much more than that. At first glance, sword light is a simple thing. Slash your sword, activate the skill, and your blade will glow bright with light. That light will then detach from the sword's edge and fly through the air to strike at your target in the distance. This can be done with any weapon, even fists. Yet over the centuries, we have discovered so many factors that play into sword light. The quality of the weapon has an impact. The condition of the edge has an impact. The nature of any enchantments on the weapon have an impact. The level of the skill, obviously, has an impact. The condition of the individual making the swing has an impact. The quality of the sword stroke has an impact. This includes the speed, power and technique. Even the mentality of the person making the strike affects the result. When all of these things are perfected to the highest, most extreme point, then you create a blade master. Excerpt from The Nature of the Sword and Its Light, by Snips. I may have been overconfident when I told Iran to negotiate at the arena. I'm pretty sure Gray knew what was coming my way, since he guided me to a fighting pit more than double the size of the last one, radiating smug energy the whole way. My new guards, Koita and Pool, were apparently ninth swords, and they were keen for a bout, just as all my previous guards had been. Koita had a decidedly raccoonish kind of cast to him, but Pool was a straight-up rhinoceros. I mean, the guy was abnormally huge, had gray skin, and a horn sticking up from his nose. Luckily, I suppose, he still had mobile digits on his hands rather than flat rhino feet, so he could wield a sword perfectly fine. When we arrived, I was treated to the end of an entertaining fight between two high-level swordsmen employing techniques I hadn't seen before. One, a dainty, fairy-looking fox folk, was sending out waves of lightning with each of her sword slashes, the crackling light and deafening booms rocking the arena every time she swung. Her opponent, a red-headed panda folk, was blasting back with thick balls of fire that shot from the tip of his blade as he executed piercing stabs. What the heck is going on here? I've never seen you guys launching magic from your swords. I demanded of Gray. Just because you hadn't seen it doesn't mean we don't do it, he replied, as even-keeled as a lily pad. That's obviously true, but I would have thought someone would have tried to roast me with fire or something by now. All I've seen so far is normal sword light. He frowns and looks at me askance. What do you mean, normal sword light? The question is posed so casually, I almost didn't notice the real curiosity behind it. Don't play coy. You think I can't sense what's going on down there? They aren't just flinging mana around. They've combined mana and sword light. For once, Gray actually appears impressed. You are correct. The reason why none of your opponents have utilized the technique should be equally apparent to you. I look back at the area, confused, then it clicks a second later. There's a barrier. Of course there's a barrier. If we want to fling around our most advanced techniques, then we can't have the mountain getting cut in half or everyone in the audience being burned to a crisp. The only reason I got away with using my spells was because I had such precise control over the area affected by them. Whoops. Makes sense. We use a barrier for tunnel ball also. Need to keep the crowd safe and the matches exciting. What is tunnel ball? Although I'd love to start preaching on the great ant pastime, which I am the undisputed best at, I have another concern I would like addressed. Does this sort of invalidate my wins? I ask, feeling a little awkward. I mean, I was using mana and such, but nobody else was. Were there things you didn't use because of the potential for widespread damage? Like a literal black hole? Yes. Then I think it's fine. Now that you've been seen here, I think I can move you to the front of the queue. We should get to see some interesting things now. Gray chuckles and it sounds suspiciously evil. I get the feeling I'm not going to enjoy this. Soon, I find myself down in the fighting pit. A much deeper one than before, with Pool the rhino folk standing on the other side, his oversized, overheavy blade in his hands, absolutely shining with sword light. When the duel starts, he pulls back on that thing and, with a mighty roar, lets rip a blazing, blinding stab that takes the shape of a horn as it flies towards me, my danger senses blaring through my antennae. Damn these sword-obsessed goons. Chapter 1168. Anthony on Tour Part 20. So I learned something. It's possible to shape sword light into horns. Also it hurts. I dodge to the side, quick as a flash, and I swear the light curves, following me before it slams into my side with the force of Tiny's fist. Luckily, I was able to angle my body to deflect the majority of the force, otherwise it may have managed to put a crack in my carapace. Not wanting to be on the receiving end of a never-ending series of similar swings, I decide I'd best put in a little offense to throw my opponent off balance. Considering the barrier is in place, I feel a little more confident unleashing some of my more potent abilities, so I decide to dash and follow up with a void chomp. Not empowered, obviously. I'm not trying to turn my opponent into paste. The gap between my mandibles fills with a howling void that draws everything in as the dark jaws of pure energy form, extending outward from my own. For his part, Cool isn't going to stand there and take it. For a moment, I see him hesitate, as if he were weighing whether to meet my lunge with one of his own, but he decides against it at the last second. Redirecting his slash into the ground, he uses the tremendous force generated to launch himself to the side, flying over my mandibles to land on my left flank. I expect Cool thinks he has time to recover there after I finish my chomp, but he's about to learn I can turn on a dime. I whirl around, 6 legs flashing to align myself before I execute a charge, unwilling to give the swordsman time to recover. Trapped in place, Cool lowers his horn and commits, winding back and gathering a dazzling amount of sword light on the tip of his blade. As I bear down on him, angling myself to slam straight on, he swings from right to left. Like a herd of stampeding rhinoceros, the light forms into a wave of horns that smack into my side. The force is absolutely tremendous, and despite my best efforts, he actually manages to shift my enormous frame off course. As I barrel past, I manage to clip my opponent with my legs, knocking him a smidge off balance, and I use that time to dig in my claws, sending a spray of sand flying up to splatter against the barrier. Holy moly, that was a seriously heavy swing, strong enough to knock me to the side, and I weigh like 10 tons or something. I mean, I haven't been on any scales, but an elephant would be a snack to me at this point. I'm big. My insides were positively rattled when I got hit, but thanks to my inner plating, I was able to absorb the blow without any cracking in my carapace. After facing Cool head-on once more, I decide it's time to get serious and bust out some gravity magic. Minds spin, power flows, and I begin to pull together the energy I need. Half my minds commit to forming the gravity well, while the others are tasked with peppering the swordsman with minor spells to buy me the time I need. A mix of fire bolts, gravity bolts, shards of ice, and everything else my sub-brains can think of is launched in a constant spray. To deal with this barrage of minor strikes, Cool simply ignores them. The fire doesn't burn him, the ice doesn't stab him, but unfortunately for him, the gravity bolts do take effect. He doesn't notice at first. Shrugging off my assault, he pulls his sword up for a massive vertical swing, but as more and more gravity spells hit him, and more specifically, hit his sword, things start to go awry. I can only imagine Cool and others of his rank are incredibly sensitive to changes to the condition of their swords. The moment he starts the downswing, he realizes something is off, but he's already committed. Sensing his hesitation, I decide to go straight for the finish, rushing headfirst towards him, weaving together a layered shield as the gravity well nears completion. The sword light that blooms is unlike anything I've ever seen before. Not only does it take the shape of a horn, but it almost appears like a charging rhino itself, racing forward above the ground. As insanely impressive as that is, the swing was off. This strike isn't as bright as those before, the light isn't as dense, and when I meet it with my shoulder, I shatter it to pieces. Cool is sent sprawling as I batter into him. The gravity well completes, and I slam it into place, pinning him to the ground. Holy moly, how many more times do I have to do this today? Despite being held in place by the power of the well, Cool puts up a mighty struggle, but ultimately is forced to concede, unable to get himself off the ground. Thankfully, he's unhurt, and not too unhappy about being defeated, even if the final blow felt like it was below the belt. "What did you do to my sword?" he asks after I connect to him, peering down at it with concern. "It's not permanent, is it?" "No, basically, I made it heavier. It's only temporary, though, no need to worry." "You made it larger. Some sort of metal magic?" Sure, let's go with that." As I said, totally temporary, no effect on the weapon itself. Perhaps unconvinced, Cool gives his weapon a few test swings, appearing satisfied by the end that I'm not lying to him. Our weapons are very important to us, he told me. I have worked with this blade for over 20 years. Well, it shoots rhinos made of light at people, I can understand not wanting to lose it. He looks at me a little confused. That's not the sword, he tells me, that's me. What? I'd assumed it was an enchantment or something. Oh no, shaping the light is the pinnacle of our skill. When I achieve mastery, I will reach the 10th sword, and be a blade master. Nice. How far off are you? I hope to achieve my goal in another 10 years. That far off? Yikes. Chapter 1169, Anthony on Tour Part 21. Once again, the strange ant, Anthony, had demonstrated insight beyond what one would expect of a monster. Baron Thoris, the lead negotiator of the island conglomerate, was delighted at how effective the monster had been, as well as being curious, if not apprehensive, about the source of his wisdom. As the fights continue, the giant ant revealed himself to be fast, strong, adept in a variety of mana types, as well as wielding that strange purple energy to devastating effect. Those enormous mandibles, each as large as a person, unleashed frighteningly powerful bites, filled with a dark energy that rocked the arena every time the skill was activated. And he was so quick. Whenever a desperate situation arose, the enormous creature moved like a dancer, with the reflexes of a spider, speeding, sliding, 6 legs moved in a blur to push his enormous bulk away from danger. In key moments, when a burst of speed was required, he almost appeared to vanish, disappearing from one point and reappearing in another, throwing down his opponents, or catching them up in his deadly jaws. The folk were entranced. Despite limiting the fights to only 8th and 9th swords, the line was dozens long. Such a rare opportunity to polish their abilities against a growing powerhouse of the dungeon. They could not resist it. Nor could the merchants with whom she dealt. It is astonishing that this colony was able to produce a monster of such immense strength in such a short time. Whiskers, the feline-looking folk praised as Anthony bested yet another challenger. If you had not shown me, I would never have believed an ant could be so strong. The colony produces many things, not only powerful individuals. Iran smiled with the exact, correct amount of warmth. They are fierce, and intelligent, proud, and industrious. Their forges produce thousands of tons of ingots every day, harvested from across all of their territories. They even crack the methods of forging fire iron by themselves. Really, the old man stroked the long whiskers that emerged from his cheeks, eyes narrowing. I don't suppose you have a sample? Without turning, Iran reached a hand over her shoulder and felt a heavy weight placed into it within seconds. She offered the metal to her fellow trader to inspect. This was forged less than a month ago outside the demon city of Orpool, she said. You can see the date and marker stamped on it. It was a good thing the ants had decided to mark their products visually and not just with scent. Apparently they continued to use their pheromone glands for this purpose, but realized not everyone who lived and worked within their nests had their same sense of smell. Whiskers turned the ingot this way and that, reading the markings, which included the date, a special mark which indicated the forge at which it was produced, and the ant who had acted as forgemaster when the ingot was cast. In this case, Smith Ant herself. It's better than I expected, Whiskers pronounced, tapping the metal with one finger. I can tell they haven't perfected the process, but they've done enough that we can reforge the metal here to refine it further. I'd be interested in buying this, and I don't mind telling you I wouldn't be the only one. Of course, the need for further firing drives the price down, I'm sure you understand as much. Iran's smile deepened. Why don't we discuss that in detail? She purred. I wonder how many ants have reached such a level of evolution, there surely can't be many. The trader who referred to herself, rather unfortunately, as bilious, was a large bear of a woman, whose appetite more than matched her frame. As far as I'm aware, there is only one other, Iran replied smoothly, leaning away slightly to give herself a little space. Though there are many who have reached tier 6. The difference between 6 and 7 is as vast as the ocean, Bilius said, a little condescendingly, as I'm sure you're aware. Yes, Iran replied, no crack to be found in her pleasant exterior. It seems your swordsmen are finding quite the challenge in Anthony. The big ant was at 10 wins in a row and didn't appear to be flagging in the slightest, despite the numerous hits he'd taken. The last fighter had managed to encase him entirely in ice, yet he'd burned his way out, seemingly unharmed. The Flowing Water School has fought, as have the Jade Dancers, the Steel Avalanche, the Advancing Rhino and Lotus Bloom, Bilius noted, but none of the top 10 schools have yet made an appearance. I'm sure one of them can put this ant in its place. You really believe a ninth sword will be able to defeat him? Iran asked with genuine surprise. It didn't seem to matter what techniques Anthony went up against, he broke them all the same. No individual Brathian would ever claim they could beat a Tier 7 mythic monster single-handed, not a sane one anyway. Perhaps a Blade Master might, but they were the finest duelists on the face of Pangara. The large woman harumphed. I don't think an ant monster is capable of surprising me, she said with open disdain. Not in the arena, nor in the marketplace. Iran nodded politely. Then I suppose you wouldn't object to a cup of tea. I have a freshly brewed cup right here. Of course, the colony has not come across the varieties the folk prefer, but I know you yourself are partial to a good, dark tea. Bilious openly scoffed as Iran accepted an exquisite porcelain cup from an assistant. This should be interesting, she said. To think a monster could even approach something like an adequate understanding of the art of tea. Nevertheless, unwilling to be too rude to one of her largest trading partners, she accepted the cup and took a deep sniff. Iran was looking for it, and was gratified to see Bilious' eyes widen as the rich aroma penetrated her snout. With careful movements, she brought the cup to her lips, and took a sip. There was silence for a long moment. Do you still believe an ant can't surprise you? Iran asked, the picture of innocence. Bilious swallowed, then frowned. Chapter 1170. Anthony on Tour Part 22. Ha ha, is this really all the fabled warriors of the folk have got? I can do this all day long. Gray raises his brows as I send my declaration ringing around the stadium, broadcasting to all and sundry in the crowd. The audience, normally reserved and respectful, are well caught up in the atmosphere at this point, watching their skilled swordsmen fall one after another. I mean, they don't boo or anything, but many of them frown, which is pretty severe by their standards. I've been working this crowd all afternoon. Are you really that keen to continue? Gray asks privately, knowing full well what the answer's going to be. Absolutely not, are you crazy? I'm getting burned, I'm getting frozen, I'm getting beams of dragon-shaped light shot at me. The last one grew a tree out of their sword and hit me with it. You seem fine. I've been taking damage and healing it, that doesn't mean I'm fine. My guts hurt, my carapace has fine cracks that'll take time to repair and I've run my healing glands so often it's demanding a paid vacation. Gray grunts. Those healing glands are cheats. Monsters can repair themselves with criminal ease. You really want to get into a conversation about balance between monsters and you weaklings. Maybe we get to be stronger so we can survive the murderous hellscape of the dungeon and not get sliced by people like you. Think about that. I mean, how much money am I even worth at this point of evolution? Gray squints at my gleaming carapace. A lot. Don't get any ideas. I come in peace. Also, think about how hard it would be to get shoes in my size. Well, the line for fighters hasn't gotten any shorter. You can keep fighting as long as you want to. More and more schools are sending their pupils, even some of the better ones. Like the Sword Tree Lady. The Blade of Surging Life. It is ranked in the top 30. I might be complaining a lot, but I'm only half exaggerating. I've been fighting mostly 8th and 9th swords, with the proportion of 9s going up over time. One-on-one, they can't really hope to beat me, especially if I'm going all out, but defeating them gracefully, one after another, dozens of fights in a row. I'm tired. Up in the stands, I can see that the activity around my Brathian trading partners has begun to slow down. Where once there was a surge of people, arguing, gesturing and conducting business, there's now a much smaller gathering, but even from my position, I can see Iran Thoris in her element. She's wheeling and dealing, making inroads and helping the colony's goods get in front of the people who need to see them. The entire point of my escapades here in the arena is to help make it a little easier for the folk to accept us. Judging by the crowd I've managed to gather, and the sheer number of challengers, I think I've achieved my work. Alright, I'm going to call it here for today, Gray, if that's okay with you. Fur poking out of his robes, the wolf folk only gestures lightly with one hand. Why wouldn't it be alright with me? I shrug my antennae. I just don't want to step on any toes, culturally speaking. I'm learning a bit about your people, but I'm hardly an expert. We want good relations between the colony and the folk. So if it's going to annoy a lot of people if I leave, then I'll stick around. He folds his arms across his chest. Plenty of people will be annoyed, but only because they don't get a chance to fight. He grins wolfishly, and the crowd will be disappointed they didn't get to see more good fights. 9th swords lining up to fight a powerful monster one after another. It's a rare treat. Great. So I should stay. Of course not, he snorts. If you want to leave, then leave. We are the folk, our appetite for the fight is bottomless. You could stand on this sand for 100 years and people wouldn't have had enough. There certainly isn't any lack of people in the arena. Anytime someone leaves, their seat is snapped up in seconds. Politely snapped up, but snapped up all the same. We should show you how to play tunnel ball, I tell him. I get the feeling your people would love it. And be good players, come to think of it. Gray seems less sure. Tunnel ball is a game. Oh, it's not a game, it's a religion. We aren't religious, as a people. Not yet. There isn't really an exit, as such, from the pit, so I just turn around and start scuttling over to the barrier and begin to poke my head through it. The crowd in front begins to move out of the way, a few people offering some claps, even the odd bow, then I'm up into the stands and out the back as Gray announces that Aunt Elvis has left the building. I barely get 2 steps out of the arena before White appears in front of me, hand up, gesturing for me to stop. Problem? I ask, but she only shakes her head. You want me to wait for Gray? She nods. It takes him 5 minutes or so. I gather he had to speak to some of the swordsmen and women who were a little irritated they'd waited for nothing, but he appears unruffled as he approaches. He speaks to White for a moment, and suddenly he looks quite ruffled indeed. White hasn't said anything to me. What's up? He growls, actually growls. The Legion is here. The way he says Legion is almost like a curse word. Haven't seen them in a while. I take it you don't get along well with them. We don't. Hey, great, neither do we.